Bonjour et bienvenue à toutes et à tous. It is my pleasure as a co-president of the Joint Canadian Association of Road Safety Professionals and La Prévention routière internationale 2021 conference and a member of the board of directors of CARS to welcome you to our fourth annual conference held this year in collaboration with PRI. It is also CARS 30th conference and PRI 14th conference. J'aimerais saluer les participants et participantes à la présente conférence. Vous venez de différents milieux des gouvernements de différents paliers canadiens, provinciaux ou internationaux, d'organisations policières ou de regroupements pour les usagers de la route ayant tous un même but, un même objectif, la sécurité routière pour toutes et tous. Je salue aussi avec nous aujourd'hui la présence de délégués de marque qui s'adresseront à vous dans quelques instants. Monsieur Jean Todt des Nations Unies, Monsieur Étienne Krog de l'Organisation mondiale de la santé et finalement Madame Zoleka Mandela, ambassadrice pour les Nations Unies. I would also like to take this time to thank the numerous persons who have made this virtual event possible. The presenter, the countless volunteers, and especially the students you'll have the chance to hear during the posters and slide deck presentation, and who represent the future of road safety in our communities. Without you, such an event could not happen. Merci. And last but not least, to all our sponsors who make such an event possible. Votre support dans un événement comme la conférence de cette année est grandement apprécié par toutes et tous et démontre clairement votre implication dans l'amélioration de la sécurité routière. Les derniers mois nous ont montré que lorsque nous travaillons ensemble et dans une même direction, nous pouvons faire bien, mais nous pouvons surtout faire mieux. Les défis auxquels la pandémie de la COVID-19 nous a confrontés sont similaires à ceux auxquels nous faisons face au quotidien pour améliorer la sécurité routière. Des enjeux de communication, des enjeux économiques, technologiques, des enjeux de culture et des enjeux de santé publique. I encourage everyone to share your experience on social media using the event hashtag CarsPRI 2021. En mon nom et au nom du comité organisateur, profitez pleinement de cette édition virtuelle de la conférence conjointe Association canadienne des professionnels de la sécurité routière, Prévention routière internationale 2021. Cette conférence annuelle, c'est plus de 300 participants, participer, échanger et surtout collaborer, ensemble, bien au-delà des quelques jours que nous passerons ensemble. Enjoy the conference. Thank you for your presence here and abroad. Bonne conférence.
Bonjour tout le monde. Good morning, everyone. I'm Valérie Lavoie, President and CEO of Desjardins General Insurance Group. Je vous remercie de votre invitation et je remercie chaleureusement tous les organisateurs qui nous ont réunis ici pour soutenir la sécurité routière. Les discussions et les échanges que nous avons lors de conférences comme celle d'aujourd'hui ont des répercussions positives sur la sécurité de nos communautés et contribuent à sauver des vies. Je vous remercie donc tous de votre présence aujourd'hui. Votre présence témoigne non seulement de l'importance que vous accordez à la sécurité routière, mais aussi de votre volonté de contribuer à la solution. As a leading insurer in Canada and as a cooperative for over 120 years, Desjardins knows the importance of partnership, collaboration, and cooperation to bring real solutions to the challenges we face. Desjardins est une coopérative au service de ses membres et de leur collectivité et Desjardins Groupe d'assurance générale trouve sa raison d'être dans la nécessité de protéger ses membres et leurs biens les plus précieux. On fait les choses un peu différemment chez Desjardins. On n'appartient pas à des actionnaires, mais à nos membres. Et nous accompagnons nos membres et clients afin qu'ils atteignent l'autonomie financière. En tant que coopérative, on vise également à enrichir nos communautés, ce qui nous pousse à investir dans la sécurité routière. Unfortunately, as a leading insurer, we also see the pain and trauma caused by the claims we handle daily. And it's because we see these cases firsthand that we understand the importance of investing in road safety. Voilà pourquoi nous investissons des millions de dollars dans des campagnes, des projets et des partenariats depuis de nombreuses années afin de créer des changements positifs, de prévenir des accidents et d'aider à sauver des vies. On partage totalement la vision selon laquelle il faut éviter à tout prix les blessures graves et les décès sur nos routes. La sécurité routière est une responsabilité partagée. Voilà pourquoi Desjardins est fier d'être à vos côtés pour exprimer en toute solidarité notre volonté de veiller à la sécurité des gens. Qu'il soit question de conduite avec les facultés affaiblies par la drogue, d'excès de vitesse ou de véhicules autonomes, cette conférence réunit d'importants intervenants pour sensibiliser et informer les gens et aider à créer le changement positif que nous souhaitons tous ardemment. As a cooperative who's been around for over a century, we know great things can happen when the community comes together. So thank you again for joining us and have a wonderful time at the conference. Thank you.
Hello and welcome. I'm Robin Robertson, President and CEO of the Traffic Injury Research Foundation. We're proud to support this international conference in partnership with CARSP, PRI, and our official host and platinum sponsor, Desjardins. On behalf of all of us, I'd like to recognize and thank this year's sponsors and exhibitors, our keynote speakers, and our delegates for choosing to take part in this global effort to make roads safer everywhere and every day. Our conference theme, Equitability, Road Safety for All through Vision Zero and Sustainable Safety, reflects our joint commitment that safe roads is a right we all share, no matter whether we choose to walk, cycle, drive, or use one of the growing number of micromobility options. No matter where we live, safe transportation is fundamental to our ability to live our lives and to thrive. We can all agree it's not an option to simply accept deaths and injuries as the price we pay for mobility. Today, road safety professionals around the world agree it is indeed possible to improve mobility. All that is required is that we prioritize the protection of human lives and make road safety a shared responsibility for everyone. In Canada, Vision Zero is also being embraced by major cities coast to coast. Progress is being made, but there is still a long way to go to reach zero deaths, and this conference is an important step in the right direction. The vision of TURF is to ensure people using roads make it home safely every day by eliminating road deaths, serious injuries, and their social costs. We look forward to sharing this virtual stage with our esteemed colleagues from around the globe to move the needle on road safety. I encourage each of you to take what you've learned from the presentations, discussions, virtual networking, and tomorrow's roundtable with international experts to strengthen road safety strategies in your respective jurisdictions when you return home. Please take advantage of opportunities to interact with presenters, panelists, exhibitors, and colleagues, and connect ideas and perspectives. I challenge each of you to use knowledge gained to create innovation and build engagement with like-minded organizations to make transportation more equitable at national, provincial, and local levels. Please enjoy the event.
Dear friends and colleagues, dear road safety community, on behalf of PRI, la Prévention Routière Internationale, and its executive committee, I am very glad to invite you to join our virtual World Conference will be held from August 23 to August 25, 2021. This conference, organized together with CARSP and TURF Canada, is a real opportunity to share knowledge, ideas, and expertise on the specific theme, equitability, road safety for all through Vision Zero and sustainable safety. High-level experts and professionals will share with you their experience and their point of view on this issue. As one of the organizers of this World Conference, I am sure that attending the scheduled session will be unforgettable for all of you. I hope there will be so many, and I wish you fruitful and very interesting conference. Welcome to all of you. Thank you.
Super. Merci beaucoup, Madame Lavoie de chez Desjardins. Merci beaucoup, Madame Robinson de chez TURF. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Benasser de Prévention routière internationale. Il me fait plaisir de vous accueillir aujourd'hui à la conférence virtuelle CARSP PRI 2021. Quelques points techniques avant qu'on passe à notre panel de présentateurs invités. Pour ceux qui parlent français et qui aimeraient avoir une interprétation simultanée de la conférence aujourd'hui avec nous, vous pouvez voir au bas de votre écran à droite sur Zoom, il y a une icône qui s'appelle « Interprétation ». Si vous cliquez sur celui-ci, vous pourrez sélectionner l'anglais si vous désirez avoir une traduction de l'anglais vers le français si vous êtes moins familier avec l'anglais. Little technical points for our English-speaking community. If you would like to hear the simultaneous interpretation of presenter that will be presenting in French during the conference and throughout the conference, on the lower right of your screen, there's a button that says interpretation. If you click that button, you can then select English interpretation, and that will translate automatically for you simultaneously the presentation done during the conference, and you'll therefore have access to the translation from French-speaking opportunities, to English directly throughout the conference. C'est maintenant mon plaisir d'introduire les trois panélistes qui vont s'adresser à vous par la suite. La première personne va être une vidéo de M. Jean Todt de l'Organisation des Nations Unies. À Jean Todt, s'il vous plaît.
Ladies, gentlemen, dear friends, I'm delighted to speak with you today on the opening of your conference. I commend Canadian Association of Road Safety Professionals, la Prévention Routière Internationale, and Traffic Injury Research Foundation for their long-standing commitment to advancing the road safety agenda. This year, we begin a new decade of action which aims to halve road traffic deaths and injuries and to provide access to safe, sustainable and affordable transport to all by 2030. The global health crisis not only changed mobility patterns and demands, but it has also made existing inequalities even more pronounced. The good news is that also we did not meet our SDG target in 2020, we're well equipped to achieve it this time around. Let me highlight the top 5 mechanisms. First, every country should develop a national road safety strategy and action plan reflecting SDG targets 3.6 and 11.2. Second, we need to rethink the interventions we develop and fund, do business differently, and coordinate action. A recent example of strong local intervention is the UN Road Safety Fund-sponsored initiative to improve the quality and safety of used cars imported by Africa. Third, there should not only be contributions from the public sector and civil society, but also from private sector, which have a clear role and responsibility. Fourth, it is important to advocate for safer transport systems during the COVID-19 recovery and its stimulus packages, and position road safety in the green transition. Last but not least, financing at the national, regional, and international level is essential for us to meet our targets. I'm convinced that with your commitment, we can achieve our vision. I wish you a successful outcome for your conference. Thank you.
Merci, M. Todt. Je passe maintenant la parole à M. Étienne Krog de l'Organisation mondiale de la santé qui va s'adresser à vous pour les prochaines 15 minutes approximativement. Là. Merci, M. Krog.
Merci beaucoup, Martin. Bonjour, chers collègues. C'est un plaisir de me joindre à vous et de parler aujourd'hui de la deuxième décennie d'action pour la sécurité routière. I will do it in English, and I hope you can see my slides at this stage. If you can, please let me know, Martin, and I hope everybody hears me. I'd like to give you a quick overview of the upcoming decade of action for road safety, very much in line with what Jean has just said, but going back and starting a little bit far away in history with this picture of what some people say was the first ever motor vehicle, the fardier à vapeur, the precursor of the car. And if this was the first car, this was the first car crash. Luckily, nothing too bad. At 4 kilometers per hour, this fardier à vapeur smashed into a wall and some bricks were damaged, but that was about it. It took another 100 years to get to this version of the more modern car, the Benz patent motor car, which some say is the first modern vehicle. Unfortunately, it's around that time also that we saw the first road deaths. Some say it's Mary Ward in 1869, some say it's Bridget Driscoll in 1896. Doesn't really matter so much of who is right, who is wrong here, and I don't want to enter into that, but what's important is that the first people started dying on the road. One fell off the vehicle, another one was driven into and died as the consequences of her injuries. And what's more important even is that at that time, society was at a crossroads. We could have decided that we will not accept death on our roads for our mobility. We will continue walking and cycling and developing public transport until other modes of transport are made safe. But unfortunately, we took the other road and we decided to go full steam ahead and produce more cars, more roads, and base our transportation system on the motor vehicle. This is the 1908 very famous Ford Model T, which was the world's first mass-produced car. And from there it went onwards. And of course, a lot of good things have come with the car. You know, thanks to the car, it's easier for us to go on holidays. It's easier for us to bring people to the hospital very quickly, to drop off our kids at school every morning, or to transport goods in large quantities on vast distances. So clearly, I'm not here to bash the car or to say everything is bad with the car. There's a lot of good things that come with it. But there's also a huge price we pay. While at the beginning of the mass production of the car around the 1900s, we were roughly at 0 deaths per year in the world. Today, we are at 1.3 million deaths year after year on the world's roads. If you add up all the deaths since the invention of the car in road traffic crashes, this is more than 50 million people. That's more deaths than World War I. It's about the same as the famous Spanish flu, one of the most deadly epidemics of all times. While at the time of the invention of the car, pneumonia, tuberculosis, or diarrhea were the leading killers of children, today, road traffic crashes are the #1 cause of death of our children. We invented a transportation system that has become the #1 killer of children. 50% of those who die on the world's roads are people who walk, who cycle, who are on motorcycles, or who use public transport. Most of these people would never even be able to buy a car. Or another way of looking at this inequality issue is that the rates of death are 3 times higher in low-income than in high-income countries. Today, the low-income countries have 1% of the world's vehicles, but they have 13% of the deaths on the world's roads. And of course, I'm talking about death, but there's much more costs in human life than the deaths. There's also the injuries and the very long-term disability that very often comes with it. More than 50 million people are injured every year, and a large proportion of those remain with a disability for the rest of their life. And the question is, why? Why do we accept a transportation system that kills and injures so many people year after year? If today somebody would come and say, I have a new invention, a fantastic new transportation system, but 50 million people are going to die over the next century due to that, of course, we would never allow it. But we're allowing it nevertheless with a system that was invented a long time ago. And I'm not talking about other problems that come with this system, like pollution, like the obesity epidemic, like traffic jams and all the time we waste in them. But I want to focus today just on road injuries and deaths and come back to my question. Why do we accept this? Is it because the car is fun? Is it because these deaths often happen one by one and therefore there's not a massive outcry? Is it because there's still fatalism and in many countries people still think that, okay, if we're going to develop, we will need more roads, we will need more cars, and therefore there will be more deaths? That's why we made this our slogan in 2004 when WHO declared road safety the theme of the annual World Health Day. Is it because the responsibility lies in so many different parts of the government? The transport ministry, the health ministry, the interior, education, finance, and foreign affairs ministries? and that it's difficult for those people to work together or to coordinate? Or is it because private companies have very actively lobbied to make the car central to our transportation system? This is a very old ad where the people inside the car basically make fun of the poor boy who is on his bicycle because he's not able to afford a car. Probably it's a combination of all of this. But it shouldn't be like that. Here is a curve over 100 years almost of road deaths in Australia. As you can see, it went up and up and up and up for half of the century until a deliberate decision was taken to do something about it. And after that, it started going down because specific interventions were put in place. And that's really what we have to learn from. And this is why the United Nations declared a first decade of action from 2011 to 2020 to really mobilize governments, mobilize actors all over the world to do more and to take actions and implement what we know works. During that decade, a specific target was introduced in the Sustainable Development Goals to reduce road injuries and deaths by 50%, recognizing thereby that road traffic crashes are an enormous development problem, costing societies an enormous amount of money and an unacceptable amount of lives. Unfortunately, progress is slow. This is a slide from our latest World Global Status Report on road traffic injuries, showing that 0 low-income countries have managed to decrease road traffic deaths between the interval that was studied 2014 to 2016, showing that some progress was happening in middle-income countries, but really most of the progress is in high-income countries, putting the focus on the fact that it is in the developing countries that more can be done, more should be done, and that more lives can be saved. And in a way, today, we're at another crossroads. We hear a lot about the self-driving cars, and this is going to be the solution. And maybe it is, but we also know that replacing the entire fleet of vehicles around the world will take several decades, probably 40 to 50 years. So we are at a crossroads. Do we want to wait another 50 years and see another 1.3 or more deaths, 1.3 million, deaths every year, which could be another 50 million over the next 30, 40 years? Or do we want to take the other road and take action? And to take action, we now have in front of us the second decade of action for road safety, 2021-2030, just declared by the UN General Assembly. This is the logo we have developed for the decade of action for road safety, specifically pointing to a zebra crossing, because the human being, and not necessarily the human being inside the car, but also the ones who walk and cycle, who are more vulnerable, the vulnerable road users, will be central throughout this decade. The decade has been declared with a specific target of reducing by 50% the number of deaths and injuries on the roads by 2030. It's a very ambitious goal, but it is possible. And we know what needs to be done. On one hand, we want to repeat what we know works and which has worked in many countries, such as the curve I showed you from Australia, but the same can be done for the UK or Canada or Sweden or many of the other European countries, which is an effective lead agency, solid statistics showing where the problem is and where interventions can be done, strong laws and enforcement, safer vehicles, sound infrastructure, and life-saving trauma care. These are the essential pillars of action of any road safety system. And these are the ones we had for the first decade of action. But in addition, we want to innovate. We want to add a number of additional steps. One is to shift to safe and active transport modes. What does that mean? More walking, more cycling, and more public transport. Moving away from a car-centered transportation system in what is a more healthy and better for the environment transportation system. Putting speed central to all of the efforts. It is really the kinetic energy that kills. That's what we have to address more. Respond to the needs of children and young people. They are central as they are the main, the most affected age group. This is, as I said, the leading cause of death for young people and children, but they're also the ones who will benefit most from the interventions we will put in place. Accelerated development of technology. There's a lot that can be gained by making technology inside our vehicles, as well as for emergency response systems, etc., better and more developed all over the world. And engage the private sector. A large part of the road crashes are linked to occupational health issues, as well as private sector being able to contribute with better fleet safety, with political pressure, and with financial efforts towards addressing road traffic crashes. A safe system. This is what is central in the new plan of action that is being finalized as we speak for this decade. With all of the different elements, roads, vehicles, people, and the safer speed, very central to all of this. But I'd like to finish on one plea, which is that what we have learned the most, I think, from the previous decade, is that political will is central. If politicians at the highest level of government decide to take action, it is possible and road safety will happen. But we can do what we want and have the best plans in the world. If politicians do not decide to put the emphasis on road safety, we will not reach our 50% reduction target. So this is an opportunity we cannot miss. And I'd like to finish with just a few key dates coming up. We will launch this new decade and the new plan of action at the end of October. And I hope Canada, as well as all countries around the world, will celebrate this launch and will take action. The global plan is almost finished. I just, before coming here, was finalizing some of the elements of it with colleagues. We will launch it, and hopefully it will be transformed into national and local plans of action. It's a blueprint that can be used to pick what is needed for each of the reality in each of the countries and the cities around the world, but it needs to be used and it needs to be transformed at the local level. We need to get ready for the high-level meeting of the UN General Assembly next year in July 2022 in New York. We need heads of state to join us, and please make sure your head of state will be there to show the highest possible level of political support for this topic. And finally, we have, before the end of the year, there's no date set because it was just declared by the UNGA, but we have a preparatory meeting that will take place on two specific topics: financing for road safety and stakeholders engagement, and more to come, but it's probably going to be end of November or early December. All in all, I think we stand at an important moment where we can really take stock of what we know and implement more, and make sure we move from a century of unsafe, dirty and passive transport to a century of safe, clean and active transport. And I'd like to leave you with a quote from the New Yorker, which says that when the people of the future look back at our century of auto life, will they regard it as a useful stage of forward motion or as a wrong turn? Is it possible that 100 years from now, the age of gassing up and driving will be seen as just a cul-de-sac in transportation history, a trip we never should have taken? Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, M. Krog, pour ce message inspirant face à la décade, finalement, là, à la décennie de la prévention pour la sécurité routière, puis les nouvelles actions qui seront mises en place, soit autant par les organisations, puis les différents paliers de gouvernement. Il me fait maintenant plaisir d'introduire Mme Zoleka Mandela, ambassadrice pour les initiatives jeunesse pour, pour les Nations Unies. Pardon. Mme Mandela, c'est à vous.
Thank you. Good morning to you all.
On semble avoir un petit problème technique du côté de Madame Mandela. Je peux voir avec vous, là, pour l'instant, si vous regardez, nous avons une section Q&A, questions-réponses. Si jamais certains d'entre vous veulent inscrire leurs réponses, vous pouvez déjà les noter. On proposer d'ici à ce que Mme Mandela se reconnecte avec nous. Nous pourrons poser des questions à M. Krog s'il veut bien répondre. Donc, vous pouvez inscrire là, soit dans le chat ou les sections Q&A d'ici à ce que Mme Mandela puisse se reconnecter. Là, il semble avoir eu une interruption dans son signal de connexion. J'ai peut-être, en fait, je vais me lancer. J'ai une première question pour vous, M. Krog. Suite à la présentation que vous nous avez faite des défis auxquels nous faisons face comme organisation, comme paliers gouvernementaux, de mise en action pour une amélioration de notre bilan routier, que ce soit au niveau local ou au niveau mondial, qu'est-ce qui diffère le plus, peut-être selon vous ou selon vos collègues, entre la nouvelle décennie d'action puis la décennie qui l'a précédée là, en termes de réalisation ou peut-être en termes d'objectifs?
Oui, c'est une bonne question. Je crois qu'il y a des similitudes et des différences. D'une part, on va continuer à mettre en œuvre ce que nous savons être les interventions nécessaires. Et j'ai présenté les différents piliers par rapport à l'infrastructure, les véhicules, la législation et la mise en œuvre des législations sur le comportement et le trauma care. Ce sont évidemment des piliers. Mais d'autre part, il y a des nouveautés. D'une part, nous avons un objectif très clair, 50% de réduction que nous n'avions pas, qui a été décidé par tous les pays du monde. Donc, c'est aussi quelque chose qu'ils doivent adopter eux-mêmes et nous espérons, on va les inspirer à prendre action. Et deuxièmement, il y a certains domaines dans lesquels sur lesquels on veut agir plus. La vitesse, les enfants et la jeunesse, le secteur privé sont certains exemples. Mais je vois que Zoleka est revenu, donc je crois que ce serait peut-être bien de lui redonner la parole.
Super. Donc, merci, M. Krog, pour votre réponse. Madame Mandela, on semble avoir résolu la problématique technique. Alors, la parole est à vous pour les prochaines 15 à 20 minutes. Madame Mandela.
Hi, Zoleka, it's your turn. If you want to go ahead.
Apologies. Good morning to you all. I'd like to take this moment to express my sincere thanks to my dearest friend, Benacer, together with CARST, PRI, and all those who contributed to this week's conference. Thank you very much for the opportunity to take part in today's opening plenary session. I am a mother advocating for the safety of children following the passing of my daughter, who was killed by a drunk driver in 2010. In June of that year, my daughter, Zanani Mandela, had barely been a teenager for more than 48 hours when her life ended prematurely after her 13th birthday. As she took her last breath on that Johannesburg road 11 years ago, 500 other children took theirs as a result of road traffic injury, the biggest killer of our young people globally. More than 500 children are killed every day. The road traffic injury pandemic being the leading cause of death worldwide for children over the age of 5, for adolescents and young adults. I represent the thousands upon thousands of families who are suffering the devastation of this man-made pandemic that continue to claim the lives and livelihoods of our children. The reality is that the plight of our young people continues to be ignored. Their cries continue to fall on deaf ears. Millions of our children are living in extreme poverty in the African continent, and life alone in Africa is certainly a constant fight for survival for anyone living here. How much more so for an innocent child? In my work with the Child Health Initiative, we focus on road traffic injury with the objective of providing a voice for the needs and the rights of children, highlighting the negative impacts of unsafe roads as well as pollution. Air pollution in developing countries tends to be far worse than in developed countries. Citizens in these countries face a higher risk of heart disease, lung cancer, and other long-term damage. Children breathe in toxic air every day and face traffic traveling at horrifying speeds as they journey to school. Across Africa, we have worked with various partners to give children safe journeys to school with road infrastructure that has actually saved lives. And this is, in so many ways, has shown that there are indeed solutions. And with the right measures put in place, we can improve survival for all. As an African, I am compelled to draw attention to the issue of my continent being failed by governments as well as the international community. And you are seeing this with how so many of our African people are becoming victims of road traffic injury. Most roads in Africa, especially where vehicles are traveling at horrific speeds, don't have safe footpaths for pedestrians. And with the majority of our children using their feet as a mode of transport to school every day, we're asking them to take their lives into their own hands. Our children should never have to bear the brunt of society's failures. They deserve a rich and productive life, and no matter where they live in this world. A very high percentage of casualties occur in middle and low income countries. Roads are badly built in developing countries. Most countries still lack policies to protect vulnerable road users. And not forgetting the reality that Africa has the world's deadliest roads, with nearly half of those dying on our roads being vulnerable users who consist of pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists. What this means is it is the poor and the vulnerable who will continue to suffer the most. This inaction has cost the lives of so many of our innocent children. We need to separate children and the most vulnerable from traffic with the use of safe sidewalks and crossings. We need to lower speeds of more than 30 kilometers an hour around sidewalks and schools should be non-negotiable. And we need to put life-saving measures in place around schools to provide and protect the basic human rights of our children. Children's rights are human rights. This is not merely a child health issue, but a human issue that requires us to join forces, to build alliances, and to work towards putting more pressure on our leaders to invest, to commit, to prioritize our children, to build better, safer, and more livable roads for those that use the roads, and to focus our efforts on reducing road fatalities, because the lives of our future generations are certainly at stake. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Mandela, pour votre message inspirant en fait, sur les implications et les retombées que doivent avoir en fait les actions qu'on mettra en place pour protéger, comme vous le mentionnez si bien, les usagers vulnérables. Suite à la présentation, encore une fois, merci à M. Krog, merci à M. Todt et Mme Mandela. Nous sommes maintenant rendus à la période des questions. Donc, si vous voulez écrire soit vos questions à l'intérieur du chat, là, la section questions et réponses pour qu'on puisse les lire à nos conférenciers, ou sinon, on peut vous donner aussi le droit de parole, mais il sera peut-être plus simple de pouvoir les écrire là, afin de permettre aux gens, aux panélistes qui vont répondre à vos questions, de pouvoir vous lire, puis par la suite de répondre à celles-ci. While we are waiting for questions from the general public and all the attendees that are with us this morning, there's more than 150 people with us this morning. My next questions would be for you, Madame Mandela. It was actually the question I did ask to Mr. Krog, is regarding that new decade of action for road safety. We've discussed, and Etienne was presenting us with what are the new challenges and what makes the new decade of action different from its predecessor. How, for you, do you envision or do you see that new decade of action taking place for protecting vulnerable users?
I think it's important to remember And I think this is the message that I want to send out, is that we're not just dealing with the issue of just there being statistics. These are real lives that are concerned. I have lost a child, and many mothers and many families have lost their children. And I think for me, I would need to make a plea to governments to really just consider the fact that we're dealing with human lives here. So as much as, you know, there are attempts to try and reduce the number of fatalities, we have to remember that this is an everyday experience that our children, especially in developing countries, are faced with every day. I have recently traveled, for instance, to Accra, Ghana, where we worked with our partners, Amend NGO, where they have shown us in so many ways that you can actually save the lives of children as they journey to school every day, by introducing the lowering of speeds, especially around schools, and by introducing safe sidewalks and safe crossings. And my message is to really say that, you know, it's examples like this, especially when you consider the efforts of Amend NGO. These are the kinds of efforts that you want to push to our leaders and say, you know, this is something that can actually be done. You know, this is the data, this is how much it costs. And, you know, we just need to ensure that our leaders really do make that commitment, because the solutions are actually quite simple. And so Amend NGO have shown us that, you know, once you put these life-saving measures into place, that children can actually, you know, deserve the life where they're able to access an education and use, you know, the roads to school without being harmed.
Perfect. Merci beaucoup. Vanessa, you have a question?
Oui, bien sûr. Merci, Martin. J'ai une question adressée à M. Etienne. Tout d'abord, je tiens à vous remercier vivement, M. Etienne, d'avoir accepté notre invitation et de participer avec nous à cette cérémonie d'ouverture, ainsi que Mme Zoleka Mandela. Je tiens à vous remercier vivement du fond du cœur. Et votre participation, il est vraiment d'une grande importance, d'un grand appui à notre initiative, notamment l'organisation de cette conférence internationale sur l'équité. Ma question, Etienne, est, c'est vrai que aujourd'hui, on va lancer incessamment, comme vous l'avez signalé, mentionné, peut-être fin octobre, on va lancer la nouvelle Disney. 2021-2030 avec des objectifs vraiment audacieux, ambitieux. C'est très important. On capitalise en quelque sorte sur les acquis de l'ancienne Disney, mais certainement on s'est gardé les mêmes objectifs, notamment la réduction de 50%, sachant que parmi les handicaps, notamment sur le plan mondial, c'est qu'au niveau des pays en voie de développement ou bien les pays à faible revenu, on n'a pas pratiquement constaté d'amélioration de la sécurité routière au niveau de ces pays. Et là, ma question, c'est la sécurité routière aussi, c'est une question de financement. Et comment les pays en voie de développement ou bien les pays à faible revenu puissent bénéficier du fonds mondial de la sécurité routière, Trust Fund, Global Trust Fund, comment ils peuvent bénéficier? Est-ce qu'il y a des actions concertées? Est-ce qu'il y a un moyen de guidage pour orienter et pour avoir un ciblage au niveau des actions et de leur financement à travers ce fonds mondial de la sécurité routière?
Merci Benasser et merci pour les remerciements. C'est vraiment toujours un plaisir de participer à ce genre de dialogue parce que je crois que la coopération internationale et l'échange d'informations sont très importants pour la sécurité routière. En termes de financement, d'abord, je crois qu'il est important de mentionner que la responsabilité de financer les actions de sécurité routière reste avec les gouvernements. Chaque gouvernement doit mettre à disposition des ressources. Et je sais que certains gouvernements ont plus de ressources que d'autres, mais tous ont quand même certaines ressources et il est important de ne pas dépendre complètement des financements extérieurs. Deuxièmement, un investissement dans la sécurité routière est rentable. Nous savons que quand on investit dans des mesures pour, par exemple, diminuer la vitesse, etc. Souvent, c'est un coût-efficacité très important. Donc, l'investissement qu'on va mettre, on va le récupérer relativement rapidement dans les mois et les années qui suivent. Maintenant, quand il s'agit du Fonds des Nations Unies, c'est vrai, c'est un outil qui a été développé et qu'il faut employer. Mais les ressources de ce fonds sont encore très limitées. Donc, il y a un processus d'application chaque année qui est ouvert, auquel les pays peuvent participer en collaboration avec des agences des Nations Unies. Donc, je crois qu'il faut aller sur le site web et voir les dates. Je ne les ai pas en tête exactement, mais c'est un processus qui est très, très ouvert et très faisable donc pour tous les pays en voie de développement qui ont besoin de soutien.
Merci, M. Krog, pour la réponse à la question de M. Benassin. The next question, I'm going to ask it in English because it was asked in the Q&A section. So it's either for Madame Mandela or Mr. Krug. How do we translate global road safety agenda to local level? It is difficult to convince local leaders and the urgency of the situation, which leads us to the second question that was asked is how do we get the government minister to make a commitment to improve those road safety indicators, as we've mentioned previously, of the 50 by 30 target?
So, Leka, you want to start? Or?
You can go ahead, Etienne. You're the expert.
Thanks, Zoleka. Well, I certainly want to point to Zoleka because Zoleka is a fantastic advocate, a very powerful, I think, at articulating the message and at calling out on policymakers about the commitments they have made. She did it so well in the ministerial conference in Brazil with her famous no excuse speech and has done it repeatedly since then. And I think that's part of the answer is, we need to demand, and there is no excuse because the policymakers have committed at national level. They have endorsed the UN General Assembly resolutions. They have endorsed the Stockholm Declaration, which both very clearly have a 50% reduction target of deaths and injuries. And now, it's not only about making these commitments, it's really about acting on them. At the local level, these decision makers have not necessarily endorsed those documents, but they're part of the overall government, which has. So I think, first of all, we need to demand that action be taken. Enough is enough. And Zoleka, I'm sure, can talk more about that. Second, we also need to show that these governments, particularly at the local level, are not alone. That there are local academics, there are local NGOs who very often are willing to help out. And there are international organizations like the World Health Organization and others who are willing to help. But they need to show the political commitment and the leadership to do so. So I think it's the carrot and the stick. We need to, on one hand, show support and encourage and show what's out there. But on the other hand, also hold people accountable for the commitments they've made. So, Leka.
Absolutely, and I also feel that we really need to do more in terms of encouraging communities. Excuse me, encouraging communities to really, ask. I'm so sorry.
That's very cute. She's a stakeholder. There needs to be youth participation in all of our.
My apologies. Yes, so I think we should, we can do a whole lot more in, trying to ensure that we, empower communities to force, political leaders and the powers that be to really take action. But I think most importantly, I think we really need to make sure that we put young people at the forefront of the agenda, because after all, I do believe that they have such an influence on society. And I think it's very important for, the powers that be to really listen to the voices of our young people who are the most vulnerable and pay attention to their needs, because at the end of the day, these are their basic human rights, the rights to safety, the right to an education. And I think it's really unfair that our children, especially in developing countries, have to literally take their lives into their own hands. And I think government really needs to, step up. And I guess in many ways, stop paying lip service. And I think they really need to pay attention to, promoting the health and the well-being of the most vulnerable.
Good, thank you. Our next question coming from the Q&A is probably more addressed towards Mr. Krug. How does the World Health Organization see the role of research in that new global plan of action 2021-2030, including before, during, and after implementation of those various road safety actions? And good example were given by Madame Mandela.
Yeah, great point. The role of academia and research are explicitly mentioned in the new global plan of action for the second decade on road safety, because it is so important. We know a lot already, and we know enough to take action, but we don't know everything, particularly about what works in low-income countries and how we can speed up. Most of the evidence is from high-income countries, so we need more research on what works in low-income countries. We need more research about the impacts of technology. We need more research on a number of issues that we really don't know very well yet how to tackle. For example, distracted driving and mobile phone use. We haven't done enough. We don't know enough about what works to address that yet. And then we need constant evaluation of the progress or the lack of progress we are making. It's not enough to have a target of 50% reduction at the global level. We want specific targets at the national and local level, and we want all of these targets to be monitored on a regular basis, not wait for 2030 and then realize we haven't achieved it, but on an annual basis, see how far we've gone and how much progress we've made or not made. And this includes better statistics on mortality and morbidity, which in many countries is still a big, big problem, that we don't know how many people are actually dying or getting injured, and therefore it's hard to measure any progress at all.
Okay. Would you like to add any points to this, Madame Mandela, or that's all good?
It's all good. It's all good.
Thank you, Mr. Krug. Our next question is, throughout the presentation, we've also addressed the let's call it the elephant in the room, because we know that there's also influences of the private sectors, the car makers, the car industry, the economic sector as well, that are not always inclined into speed reduction because they see it as a loss of production. So how do we see it, that presence and that integration of the private sectors and those private industry, either car maker or the economic sector, as part of that participation in road safety? Madame Mandela, you've raised some points on how should we implement and how should we modify the built environment, but how can they be part of those changes as well, being part? We have numerous sponsors during the conference that do believe in road safety, and that's why they're standing with us today. But how can we see the private sectors into the improvement of road safety in general?
Again, I can only, I mean, I can't exactly answer as an expert, because I'm simply a mother that, you know, has lost a child and is advocating for the rights of children. I think we really just, you know, really need to think about the, you know, the families that continue to, you know, lose their children and their loved ones as a result of negligence, because government is not doing enough to ensure that they build, you know, livable streets for the people. So they're making all these, you know, changes to roads and building roads, but they're not making them, you know, safe for the people that actually use the roads. And so I think it's really important to just take into consideration that there are so many children, especially in developing countries, as I said earlier, that use, you know, their feet to travel to school every day, and that's their reality. And I think, again, just going back to the projects that was done, for instance, by Amend NGO, that shows that there are certain life-saving measures that can be put in place that have actually shown to help save lives, especially the lives of our children. And I think it just really needs our policymakers to really make that commitment and really take action.
maybe I'll build upon that points that you've raised, Madam Mandela, and the question might be more for Mr. Krug on how was this, and the question was how the could you provide us some ideas or general thoughts, if they do exist, or if facts are inclined with those, of how the automotive industry was integrated into Europe plans of action for road safety issues, or they want to act more as a, I'll say, lone wolf, but are they left aside, or they decide to act aside and not being part of that global road action for safety?
Yeah, I'll answer that one and the previous question as well a little bit, because I think the role of the private sector has not been discussed enough when we talk about road safety, and addressing the commercial determinants of road safety is extremely important if we are to make more progress in this decade. And what does that mean? I think that the private sector can play a very positive role as well as a rather negative role. So positive would be for the car makers, for example, make sure that all the vehicles sold include all of the basic safety features, and not only those that are required by the government that the vehicle is sold in. For example, you could have a vehicle sold in Canada or in Europe with all of the necessary safety features, and the same vehicle will be sold in Botswana or in Brazil with is looking the same, but has been stripped from its safety features to make it cheaper. So that's the kind of behavior we cannot accept anymore. And all vehicles everywhere in the world should be made as safe as possible. And then, research needs to continue in making vehicles safe, not only for people who are inside the car, but also for people who walk and cycle and are outside the car. But it's not only about the car makers. It's also about many other parts of the industry. The alcohol industry is an obvious one, and marketing alcohol to young people when we know they're going to be driving afterwards is, of course, a very risky undertaking. By the way, marketing vehicles on the speed they can take is also not very productive and should also be frowned upon. And then there's many other aspects that touch to the private sector. Private sector has very big fleets, sometimes in the tens of thousands. They also have lots of employees that they can influence. They have contractors that they can influence. And so making sure that they use this influence in order to make sure that the contractors and the employees and their own fleets are as safe as possible is very important as well. And finally, private sector has political influence, has financial possibilities. This can be also used to support road safety efforts at the local or at the national level. So I think there are many opportunities where private sector can contribute to the effort or not. Up to us, again, that's where we need the advocates, civil society, and academia to point to those issues and call them out loudly, so that private sector collaborates in the right direction.
And I'll use part of that answer, Mr. Krug, to ask the second, another question that comes from the public, is how can we promote the youth, the students and young professionals to have a voice at the road safety table? Because as you've said, we have to convince people to be part of that solution, either from the industry, the NGO or government level. But how can we make sure that young professional or students will not only be part of that solution for road safety, but that they'll also be listened to when saying a word regarding road safety?
Yeah, that's also very important. And the new plan of action, again, mentions the issue of the private sector, the good and the bad, as well as the importance of young people to involve them as stakeholders, as those for whom it has become the leading cause of death, but also as a group that can contribute to the solution. And so we want to make sure that they are heard, and they also have to make sure that they are heard. So there are a number of youth NGOs. The biggest and global one is Youth for Road Safety, but they also have national NGO groups. And I would encourage young people to join NGOs or to create their own NGOs if they do not exist, to make sure they're organized and vocal. And I would invite all governments counterparts to make sure also that young people are part of the stakeholders that they consult with and involved in developing plans as well as carrying them out. But Zoleka has been very actively calling for youth involvement as well, including for a youth summit. So I think listening to Zoleka's calls and other people's calls on that issues is also very important.
Would you like to add on that, Madame Mandela, or?
Yes, so we've been campaigning for a summit that's really going to be the voice of the adolescents, that's really going to address all the issues that our young people are faced with, the issues of mental health, the issues of sexual violence, the issues of road traffic injury at this global summit. And by establishing the summit, you'll have the young people actually speaking out and wanting leaders to take action, so that they're able to identify the issues that they're currently struggling with.
Thank you. We have another questions coming from the Q&A. This one, I'll be asking it in French. It's more specifically for Monsieur Krog. Êtes-vous au courant d'études qui lient le comportement des enfants et la conception des rues, donc l'environnement construit, surtout autour des écoles, par exemple, toujours localiser le débarcadère du côté de l'école ou peut-être des guides de meilleures pratiques?
Oui, il y a des guides qui existent par rapport au développement de l'infrastructure autour des écoles, ainsi que dans les communautés. Il y a des guides qui ont été faits par NACTO sur la conception des villes en général par rapport à la sécurité routière, inclut la conception des espaces pour les enfants, non seulement pour marcher et faire du vélo en sécurité, mais aussi pour jouer. Donc il y a des documents qui existent, qui peuvent être consultés. C'est un aspect très important sur lequel on veut mettre plus l'accent à l'avenir. Parce que ce qu'on voit souvent dans les pays en voie de développement, c'est-à-dire des endroits où il y a des villages où les enfants peuvent jouer parce que la rue est en terre battue, les véhicules ne peuvent pas aller à grande vitesse. Et une fois que le soi-disant développement arrive, les rues sont bétonisées, les espaces pour les enfants disparaissent et ils sont obligés de jouer sur la rue où maintenant les véhicules arrivent à grande vitesse et bien sûr c'est un carnage.
Super, merci. The next question is more in regards with the decade of action and the responsibilities associated with the 50 for 30. So addressing the question of results and who's going to be responsible is you've addressed the responsibility is spread across various government department or ministries as well as NGOs and people. All have a role, but responsibility is shared and is not a primary issue for any of them. So should there be an effort to consolidate responsibility because it's a shared responsibility, but at the end, it looks like no one is really responsible for it. So how can we implement and how can we make sure that we enact real responsibility? And if ever we don't reach those goals for 2030, who's going to be responsible for those?
Well, the ultimate responsibility to achieve the target is with governments. I mean, they're the ones who can put in place the measures needed to make sure there is coordination, to make sure there is leadership, to make sure there's a national plan, that there are targets, and that every part of government plays its role. It is true that it is not easy to identify one group and say that they are responsible, and therefore this coordination needs to come from the highest level. I'm talking prime ministers and presidents. This is why we want them to come to the high-level meeting of the UN General Assembly next year. But every government needs to make its own plan. And in that plan, there need to be clear roles for each of the different sectors involved. The health sector needs to have its role, which is related but different from the transport sector or the interior ministry, etc. So that's the way to do it, is really to make sure there is one coordinating body, but each part of government has its role clearly defined together with its budget and targets to achieve.
Good. The next questions is for Madame Mandela. It is associated with research, but the question that has been asked is the biggest concern often for research and especially for low and middle income countries is accessing the data, the facts and the information we need in order to document, in order to track, and then in order to identify what are the challenges and how can we identify those challenges to propose interventions and to find ideally solution to reduce the burden of road safety. So are you aware of any initiatives, or how can we get better access to that data for researchers that would like to intervene, but that for now cannot address the questions because there's no data for them to look at?
Could I ask my colleague, who's the expert, Etienne, to answer that? I think he would be more appropriate at answering that question.
Thanks, Oleka. But Martin, I didn't understand the question very well. What's the question?
The question was, how can we assess road safety, in particular where and when road safety cannot really be assessed because we don't have the data to assess it? You've mentioned it because there's lots of collisions data that we probably only have access to the tipping point of the iceberg. So we're missing good quality data worldwide to assess road safety. And therefore it's hard to either intervene or to develop new intervention to promote and to improve road safety without that data.
Yeah, no, it is an important issue. And I think the first step is to continue strengthening the data collection efforts, and WHO is actively working on that with a number of countries ranging from Zambia to Cote d'Ivoire to Pakistan and others. And we are also collaborating with partners on that, particularly with regional road safety observatories, which have been created now in many different regions in the world. In the meanwhile, because it does take time to build up data collection systems, specific studies can be done. A survey can be done by an academic institution, at least in the capital city or in some specific areas, to get a sense of how big the problem is. And then redo it 2 years later, for example, once some interventions have been put in place. But all in all, yes, we have to strive towards better, more comprehensive data, which all countries have some level of data collection. But yeah, it's a question of improving it. Methods exist. Again, it requires some investment in political will.
And maybe as a last questions for the two of you, trying to wrap up all the questions, the really good questions we had in the Q&A is in your vision and how you envision the new decade of action 21 to 2030, what are the targets, and not specifically related to the decade of action for road safety, but what is the targets you want to achieve, either in terms of funding for low and middle income countries, either in terms of target or collaboration or prevention? So what are your, I'll call them your dreams. What are your dreams for that next decade of action?
Well, I mean, Zoleka, you want to give your dreams first, or?
Oh, you can go ahead. I'll go after you.
Thanks. For me, certainly, it is to see the heads of states, the ministers and prime ministers take on this issue much more seriously, recognize the importance and that action is possible by joining us for the high-level meeting, but that more importantly, afterwards, put in place national plans with targets, fund them and implement them. Because road safety is achievable. As Oleka was saying, it's not that hard. We know what needs to be done, we can do it, but it's a question of really rolling up our sleeves and doing it, not shying away from responsibilities, and put in motion what we know works. My dream is to see that happen, not only in some of the high-income countries where a lot of progress has also been done, but in low-income countries, particularly also putting these other modes of transport than the car, which is walking, cycling, and public transport, much more central into all of our efforts.
So my dream, I guess, is more of a plea, is to really make our roads livable. And I think it shouldn't matter where any of our children live. They should be able to have safe and healthy journeys to school. And I would really just, plea with our leaders to really prioritize, the rights and the needs of our young people.
Good. Thank you to the both of you. It is with these words that I highly thank you for the message you gave us this morning. For some of you, it's this afternoon or this evening. I want to wish everyone a really good conference. I invite you to join the lunch and trade show exhibition, at 11:45. There's going to be a panel starting at 12:30 Eastern Time. Once again, merci Madame Mandela, merci Monsieur Krog et merci Monsieur Todd pour vos excellentes présentations. Bonne conférence à tous, bonne sécurité routière et bonne semaine de conférence avec nous, la conférence conjointe CARSP Prévention routière internationale 2021. Merci à tous, bonne journée.
Merci, bye bye.
Merci Monsieur Krog.